I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. How was your Christmas and New Year? Look, I truly hope that you had some fabulous time with those you love the most, as well as some time to pause and reset for the year ahead. I also hope you've had the chance to listen to some of the past episodes of the show during the summer break. Now, before we start today's episode, I wanted to take a moment to thank members of this wonderful community who have rated, reviewed, or shared this podcast with someone else. It not only means the world to me, but just a few moments of your time doing one or all of those three simple things means it will help this podcast reach even more women. Women who could really benefit from receiving important information from health experts, as well as listening to uplifting conversations with other amazing midlife women. And together we can make this second half of life even better for each other. Now, today we're going to be talking with psychologist Jane Jamieson about the evolving role that parents experience over the years. Whether you're a parent or not, you'll appreciate the many ups and downs that come with the role. Now, Jane considers her role as a mum to be the most important, challenging, and fulfilling aspect of her life. And I must say that I totally agree with her. One thing that I've discovered over the last few years is that although your role may be far less intensive as your children become adults, it doesn't mean that it becomes easier. And as with all stages, it's just different. Jane's a dedicated psychologist who works in a private practice where she employs a holistic and neuroaffirming approach to therapy. Her therapeutic style combines evidence-based practices with a deep understanding of individual needs, fostering personal growth and resilience. Jane has completed additional study in perinatal psychology and is a Circle of Security parenting facilitator. Without further ado, let's begin today's show. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast, Jane.
Thank you so much.
This is going to be a really interesting conversation because today you and I are going to discuss the evolving role of motherhood over the years, how it changes, how it morphs as the children get older, and then what that means for us as the role, in inverted commas, as a mum. And as a psychologist, you're able to support women with some of those challenges that will be coming up.
Absolutely, yes.
And I know you're not going to have all the answers for us, and everyone's own experience is going to be completely different, but having a perspective coming from a professional who works with mums and parents, this is going to be really valuable. So thank you for coming on. We really appreciate that. And before we get into the juicy questions, I'd love to know your own journey into psychology, and was it a profession that you always wanted to get into?
Oh, great question. I took quite a long and winding kind of journey to get to psychology. So when I left school, I started uni and I started doing sort of the arts communications. Then I moved to business, and then I started doing some psychology subjects as well. This was back before HEX was absolutely ridiculous and you could kind of bounce around a little bit. So I did all of that, and then I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was working, but I decided to go traveling. So I went and spent a couple of years over in the UK, where I fell into project management work and change management work. And then I came back when my 2-year visa was up, and I was one of those people where you had 10 years to finish uni, and I was scraping down for like the 10th year. So I had to take on this full course load to like get my bachelor's. So I kind of did it that I could graduate with a business degree with a specialization in psychology. So I did that, finally got the bit of paper, and then went to work back in kind of project management type work and change management. But there was something about psychology that kind of had really spoken to me, and I wanted to do more in that space. So I started studying part-time, and I got my honours degree, and then decided I wanted to continue. So I started a master's, and a lot of other things happened, but that was when I also became pregnant. And I had these grand plans of having my baby and then getting straight back to work and study, but it didn't quite work out like that. And I took a very extended kind of time off with maternity leave, which then led to the uni I was at not offering the master's course I was in. So I took a different pathway and started an internship and got my registration that way.
Okay, so I know what you mean by internship, but a lot of the listeners may not. I only know because my daughter's doing this right now. Can you explain what that actually means?
Absolutely. So there's a certain pathway in psychology where you can basically, you work while you're learning the skills and also completing the competencies of a psychologist. So I worked in a small private practice that kind of had a little bit of a forensic flavor to it, which was a really cool way to kind of learn and hone those skills while also ticking off the competencies. I also did that part-time around parenting, so it took me quite a while, but I finally got there.
Yep.
And finally got that piece of paper. It was a real journey.
It was a real journey. Well, sometimes that makes you a better psychologist, I think, because you had that real determination to get you there. It was something that you knew you wanted to do. So for me, I would rather see somebody who's worked hard to get to where they wanted to be rather than somebody that had to do something to get through uni by the end of the 10th year.
Absolutely. I agree.
So Jane, tell me more about your interest in the area of supporting parents and mothers in particular.
Okay. So that really started for me when I had my baby. So I started to kind of really consider, parenting and what kind of parent I wanted to be. And I sort of felt that through pregnancy, I'd been given a lot of information about sort of the birth and how to kind of keep this tiny human alive. But I didn't get very much information around sort of parenting and parenting style and attachment. And so I started thinking about that, and I kind of came up with this idea, when my kid had grown up and had left home and was off, doing their own thing at uni or whatever, and they came home to my home, like our hometown, I really wanted them to want to catch up with mum and want to spend time with me, not kind of have that tick box of, oh yeah, have to do dinner, have to go home kind of thing. I really wanted to kind of be part of their life and want to know what was happening and wanted them to want that as well. And that kind of, I guess, started my research in the space of attachment theory and secure attachment. And I kind of learned that some of these things that we want later in life, we don't just start them later in the parenting life. We start it at the beginning and all the way through. And I guess, at any point, we can also change our parenting style to parent in a way that is more around connection and building that connection with our kids. So that was kind of what started, I guess, my interest in that area.
That's really interesting. I'm just thinking about when you were saying that you can change your parenting style throughout the stages and ages. I think my own personal experience is that you almost have to, because you're dealing with individuals. And if you've got more than one child, then you've got to, you will be parenting slightly different according to the personality of the children. And that will change as they grow older and as you grow older and go through life experiences. So it's continually evolving, isn't it?
I think you're spot on. And I think, we do the best we can with the information we have.
Yeah.
And when we know better, we do better. Yeah. And I think we're all, we're learning lots of new ways. Parenting has really changed in the last 20 years, and we're learning new information all of the time. So as we learn that new information, no matter where we are in our journey, I think we want to kind of be including that, kind of reflecting on how am I doing things? Why am I doing things the way that I'm doing them? And how do I be more intentional in my parenting or whatever it is to kind of hit that goal we're looking for?
And a lot of parents might come into that role with their own baggage of what it was like to be parented by their own parents. They go, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be different to my mum or my dad or whatever it might be. So you've also got those what it's on auto loop of what you experience as a child. Sometimes people are really cognizant that they don't want to be like that, or sometimes it's because it's so heavily in the subconscious, they might parent the same way and wonder why they're getting the same results. So it'll be fascinating.
Absolutely. what you're touching on right there is really key. So if we just go about parenting, our default way of parenting will basically be how we were parented. So that's kind of our autopilot setting. And that's why we find ourselves saying things our mum said or our dad said that we couldn't stand them saying, and it just slips out of our mouth. And we're like, oh my gosh, how am I saying that?
Yeah.
Like, we all do that, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's that piece around reflection, right? So where we start to notice, oh, so that's my default parenting and the way that I will naturally parent. But I can kind of be conscious of that and learn different techniques and new ways of doing things so I can pause and maybe make a change or make a correction or do something differently if we're wanting, a different relationship with our kids.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Now, amongst our listeners, we have got a really big variation on the different stages of motherhood. And that depends on how early they may have started their parenting journey or how late they may have had children. And as well, we've got blended families in. So you've got parents who may have new family members coming in. So there's all different sorts of people who are going to be along the stage. And then we've got people who have no children whatsoever and have stayed as a solo person or with a partner without any children. So we've got a big variety of listeners here. So what you're saying today, is that going to be helpful no matter what again, I suppose you don't know what questions I'm going to ask you, but the advice that you're giving, can it be fairly general? So no matter where you are along the stage, people can implement some of the things that you're going to share with us today?
Absolutely. So I've kind of got one of those new age type families. Mm-hmm. I have an incredible stepdaughter who is 18 and I have 2 other younger children. So, definitely understand that families come in all shapes and sizes now. I think the information that I'm going to share with you today is really kind of universal, right? So it will apply, and how you apply it will be different based on your own certain situations. But the principles really around secure attachment and that piece around being in relationship and belonging. We're all humans. At the end of the day, all humans want is to be seen, to be heard, and to belong. So I think we can apply that, to our stepkids, to our biological kids, to our friends' kids, to, regardless of where we're at in our parenting journey. And I also want to really reassure your listeners, no matter where they are, at any point we can make a change if we feel that that's, more aligned after we gather new information.
Yeah. Again, that's really good to know that things can change. It doesn't have to be stagnant and stay where it is right now. We've got that opportunity to evolve.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's exciting.
That's what I've noticed as well, Jane, because I've discovered in my role as a mother now for 2.5 decades, and from talking to other mums who are at a similar stage where I am, that the role doesn't always get easier. It just is different. And you may not have had, like for my example, you may not have the busyness of those earlier years that you have. You may not have the angst of the teenage years and everything that can bring. But it's a role now that I'm experiencing that you can't take over the management or of a certain situation. You're no longer in that case because your children are young adults. You have to be there as the support person and just watch your children perhaps make those mistakes. And it's from the sidelines. And that is really hard because when you're a mum and the kids are under your roof, you've got, and they're younger, you've got more of that opportunity to be involved, but you've only got a very small slice. And it's lovely that they want you to be involved, but oh, gosh, that's hard. That is really hard. And I've had discussions probably the last 6-8 months with a couple of my friends whose children are going through, difficult situations as well, breakups or, could be career things or just big life stuff in general. And it's really tricky, but they have to make their mistakes too and learn that way.
And if you think back to your own teen years, even though your parents probably watched you doing things going, pulling their hair out, it is the hardest thing to, and I think as parents, even with little ones, just stepping back and watching them do something where you go, I could fix this. I know the answer, but they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it from you.
No.
We learn from our own experiences. And, I think what you touched on is key, that ability to kind of still be present and be in connection, even though you're not holding the reins or running the show. They're kind of stepping up and doing that for themselves. And, it is evolving, as our kids change and their needs change, our role and how we parent, how we turn up looks different.
Yeah.
And sometimes sitting there, sometimes you see a parent, whether it's in a playground or at a school function or out and they sit there and they're kind of smiling and they're not saying anything or doing anything, but internally they're doing a huge amount of things. They're trying not to say something that they want to say. They're trying not to correct the behavior that's just occurred, where they're just possibly inside going, no, it's okay if they do that. It doesn't feel comfortable for me. Like, we see these parents where I go, there's often so many processes happening for these parents who are reflective, and often standing there and not saying anything is the hardest of them all.
It is really, really hard. And that's it. You raise your children to be independent young adults that can contribute, that can make decisions for themselves, that make a difference in the world. And that's the role I took and my husband and I took his role as parents, to do that for our children. And if we're so damn proud that they can do that, but it is hard sometimes. And I think
absolutely the hardest thing about raising strong independent kids is living with strong independent kids.
Yes. Now we'll go on to some of the questions that I've got prepared for our conversation today, and we'll talk about the roles of mothers. I've noticed when I was in the teaching role in the teaching world, and I was a teacher of young children in the primary school setting for over 3 decades. In those years, or over those years, I noticed the role of parents and mothers changed quite a lot. We've got the term now, helicopter parents, all of that sort of thing. But I noticed there was a lot more mothers, or many more mothers, wanting to solve the problems for their children so they didn't face adversity, and to fix all of the problems. That was just something I observed with professional eyes. I just want to know, have you observed the roles of mothers evolving, especially in the context, say, of young children, school-aged children through to young adulthood, in your practice or your research? Is that something that is really picked up in the literature or your experience?
Absolutely. So much has changed. I kind of want to just touch on that comment, because you sort of said helicopter parents there.
Yeah.
And I think that was really big kind of parenting in kind of the 90s and around that time, where the idea was that parents wanted to, firstly, they wanted to absolutely do the best for their kids. And I think a lot of them kind of wanted to solve their kids' problem. They didn't want their kids to experience uncomfortable feelings. They wanted to kind of fix things and kind of almost protect them from discomfort. And, they were doing the best they could. We know that, a lot of people, it's a real skill, right, to be able to sit with uncomfortable feelings. And when we helicopter parent and we shield our kids from these uncomfortable feelings, you can't helicopter parent a teen or a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old. They have to experience these uncomfortable feelings, and they have to solve problems for themselves. And these are skills that we want to build, right? So very much now there's sort of a real focus, I guess, around those sort of emotional regulation skills, and how do we help people sit with uncomfortable feelings? And that's for everyone. That's for parents, for kids, for adults. As humans, we don't like it, and we often want to distract ourselves, run away from, or fill these voids with chocolate, alcohol, sex, drugs, you name it. We don't like uncomfortable feelings. So I think there has been a real shift in, raising more resilient kids. So exactly what you touched on before, sitting beside them and helping them kind of solve their problems in a way where they're taking the lead and you're there for support. And how this looks and how you apply this depends, right, on the kid and what's age appropriate. So we're obviously a lot more helpful with younger ones, possibly more hands-on, but still we might be standing beside and kind of sports casting. How could you do that? How could you solve that? And with our teens, like more around that, oh, that sounds really tricky. What do you think you might do? kind of build these problem solving and build these resilience, kind of go, oh, it feels, you know, that happened and that's really disappointing. So we kind of start getting used to sitting with these uncomfortable feelings like disappointment. And we know, you know, disappointment doesn't feel great, but it won't kill us. We'll be okay. So a lot of the work we do now, kind of get a bit distracted there, but around that sort of more free range and kind of supporting our kids and helping our kids to kind of build these skills themselves, is something that I think is really important. I guess in terms of as well how things have changed, we've got a real focus now on secure attachment and how we build our parenting around being in relationship with our child. So we kind of, you know, we want to be that sort of secure base, that secure, safe home base for them to go out and explore from and come back to when they need us. And again, how we apply that is really different depending on your own circumstances, your child's circumstances.
Yeah, there's no one size fits all. It's a really, I don't know, they're massive questions, and I don't expect you to have the answer because there are so many variables that you've got for every question, because every family is different, every situation is different, and it evolves continually. One thing I used to like to say, a term that I used to have is like the core, the umbilical cord of as I get older is that every time it was that little bit longer, that cord went a little bit longer and bring them back in when they needed it, or and then let it out a little bit more again until the point where you could, you know, in inverted commas, cut the cord and they're independent young adults. So yeah, I really appreciate you trying to answer these questions as a one size fits all when it's absolutely not. And we'll have parents who are listening today, or mums listening today, whose child is going to be at a certain crossroad, whether that is starting a school, going to a different school, starting high school, starting university, leaving home because they're on to starting university or a new job. There are so many different phases and stages. So what we're talking about today is going to be really helpful for parents to just get their heads around some of these big transition times.
Absolutely, I hope so.
It will. So in your experiences, what are some of the common challenges that mothers of, say, school-age children may differ from previous generations? So what are some of those more common challenges?
Biggest challenge that I see is basically we're kind of the first lot of parents coming through now who are parenting in the information age. And obviously the internet and smartphones has really, it's changed our world. And if you kind of look at your average house now and sort of how things happen in that household, it is really different to how it was, you know, 20 years ago. And I think there's actually a lot there that's going on. And we see that as probably I see that a lot as one of the key challenges. So there's quite a big kind of generational gap, I think, as well, between parents who are coming through now. So a lot of parents, there's just so much more information. So they're getting information online. They have access to unprecedented kind of information from all kinds of sources. Some are great and evidence-based, some not so great on Instagram that you'll find. And they just have access to this information in a way the previous generation didn't. So I think previously a lot of mums kind of had more advice from their own mums or their own family or from sort of, you know, their kind of community, whereas now there's just a lot more online. And I think there's definitely some challenges there, some challenges for parents and also challenges for grandparents. Like they're feeling quite a difference and quite a shift as well in all of this.
Yes. Yep. So are there, like we're talking about, if you bring in that social media, and we're looking at, in particular, it might be lots of information that we're looking at, or we're looking at celebrity or an influencer and seeing their highlight reel. So let's delve into the expectations that mothers may place on themselves, because I think that comes inherent with the role as well. You've got high expectations and high levels of guilt, and you want low rates of failure, so the baby comes out and all that gets put in instead. Why do you think mothers tend to set high standards for themselves, and how can that impact well-being?
I see this in clinic all of the time. So mums want to do a good job. They have this baby and I genuinely believe mums are trying their best and they want to do a really good job. And I think it's really hard, and I don't think a lot of mums are very well set up to succeed in that role. So we have mums, and I was a bit like this myself. We got pregnant and had very kind of clear ideas on how I'd be returning to work and the kind of schedule I was going to have, and then had Bub and had some real kind of changes and shifts in that. Yeah. And we definitely see that, but we also have a lot of kind of working mums as well who have, you know, mortgages and, you know, have plans to return to work, and, you know, they don't all have the ability to kind of take off time the way they might want to. And some people don't, you know, enjoy mat leave and they want to go back. Like, it's really different and really nuanced in every situation. I do see a lot of this kind of perfectionism, and these mums who do have kind of quite high standards. I think they hold the bar up quite high, and then they almost, you know, it's quite impossibly high at times. And then they almost like to grab that bar and beat themselves when they're not reaching these sort of impossible standards. And I think a lot of that comes, so firstly, you know, the internet doesn't help that, because we do see highlight reels and we see people doing things certain ways and we go, oh, it looks so easy for everybody else. Why is this so hard? And I think a lot of the time, you know, if we pause, mums aren't just mothering. Like, a lot of the time there's households to be run, a lot of admin to be done. Some of them are working, like returning to work already, or are juggling. Some are going through separation and are doing, you know, a lot of kind of emotional labor and a lot of work. Some are managing aging parents, and we have a lot of people playing a lot of different roles, and they go, it's impossible. And when they put sort of one lens of, oh, I'm struggling with being what they perceive as a quote unquote good mum, it's like, well, let's just pause and look at all of these things that you have on your plate, and let's have a look at your own well-being. And so I see a lot of mums who are quite burnt out. They're exhausted, they're emotionally fatigued, they start to experience, you know, depression, anxiety, these kind of symptoms that come with really an impossible job, I would say.
Yeah, you can certainly see that. And that was there, I think, and those feelings that you were describing there, when I didn't have access when my children were younger to social media, because it wasn't around then. The internet was just coming through, but you didn't have that great access and that huge bulk of information that's there now. So yeah, just taking that away, I think that's inherent sometimes with that whole role of feeling like you've got to do it all and be at that high level all of the time. And should one of those possibly fall down to lower than what you are wanting or expecting, then you see that as a failure. So we almost as women set ourselves up to fail sometimes because of those really lofty, high expectations that we place on ourselves. It's hard.
Absolutely.
You know, are you finding it better? Because I just know in general, like, people are getting better about talking about the harder stuff. When I went through as a parent and when the kids were younger, yeah, you might have sort of laugh off the terrible twos or this stage or whatever, but it really, how we were feeling wasn't really discussed as much. Is that changing?
It is. I'd love to see it change quicker and more of that. I think it's really important. I think, you know, that quote unquote good mum and what we hold up as a good mum it's not real. It's this standard that, you know, it's perfectionism. It's you're the perfect mum. You know, however you phrase it, whether it's stay-at-home mum, like, it's basically that notion of having everything together and being able to do it all, and this superhuman that can do everything. And it's not real.
No.
You know, it leads to a lot of burnout and feelings of, you know, inadequacy and like, I can't reach this unrealistic standard. So I think the more we talk about this and kind of sit down and go, well, hang on, we also kind of have these beliefs around what a good mum should be. And we kind of need to pause and go, where did I get that from?
Yeah.
So a lot of us would have got that from, you know, how we were parented and from watching our mums kind of do it all, so to speak. some of us from society, from culture, from watching these highlight reels on Instagram. And I think a lot of us have a really unrealistic view of what it means to kind of be a happy, healthy, thriving mum.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the more we talk about it, the better.
I think so too. And it's to be kind to yourself, because really they're impossible standards that often we set for ourselves or perceive that we have to reach. And no one in reality has got their shit together with all things at all times. I mean, that is real. And if you constantly see someone that looks like they do, they're lying. And I think we just need that reality check. So we talked about that balance. How can, or how could you suggest mothers strike a better balance between nurturing their children and that role of being, you know, the mother, or whatever age or stage the children are at, with their own emotional and mental well-being, particularly when you've got all of those pressures and they can feel overwhelming? So what sort of strategies do you work with when you're working with mums in that area?
Great question. So what I often find with mums who come presenting like this is I kind of ask them, you know, where are things at for you and what do you need? Or what do you like doing? And so many mums can't tell me what they like anymore or what they need. They are so focused on their kids' needs, on their partner's needs, on this, you know, parents, all of these different things, all of that, they kind of don't make any room for themselves and their own well-being. So with mums, we kind of pause and we go, okay, I remind them of that cliche, right, on the airplane where they say, you've got to put your own oxygen mask on before you help anyone else. And I really pause there. I'm like, if you're just putting oxygen on all of the people around you, like, you are going to run out of air. You will not be able to breathe and you're going to be in a real horrible place. It's not like this self-care piece as a mum is not optional. So we need to find ways to care for ourselves so we can turn up in a way that we can be the mum we want to be. Like, I sort of talk to my mums, I go, you know, if you, let's just say you had a morning where you had maybe 2 hours off the clock, for example, on a Saturday morning, and you went for a walk, you had some breakfast, you had a bit of a sleep in, and then you came back and your child was having a hard time and you needed to help them with their feelings. It's much easier to do that once you've had some care for yourself and you're kind of in your own sort of zone. It's very different when you wake up exhausted, you haven't eaten, you haven't even shared, like, you know, you're having a hard time. It's hard to turn up and be present and kind of parent the way you want to parent. That's where we find a lot of mums kind of slipping into what we call kind of reactivity, where they're living on the edge and they're reacting. They can't kind of pause and respond to a situation. They're just so burnt out. I just want to give these ones a big hug and just go, okay, we need to care for you.
Yeah.
We need you to kind of take some time. And a lot of what we do in kind of therapy is going, how do we do that? And I think, you know, I'm a big fan of, like, firstly, like that boring self-care. So I think self-care comes in kind of small, medium, large, and a good old extra large if you can. But a lot of people think of self-care as, oh, I've got to get off the clock and, like, you know, spend an hour, like, you know, the old day spa analogy or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, hang on. What are some small things where if you that you can do even with your kids when you're on or wherever you are, like, can you pause and put a cup of coffee on or whatever it is you like to do and do 10 minutes of breathing? Sometimes I might, you know, say to my kids, like, get outside. Everyone's got to find 3 living creatures in the garden. So they're doing something while I am standing there with a coffee. Yeah, a spider. And if they're too similar, we've got to find 5. Keep looking.
Love it.
Like, what are some small things? And sometimes self-care saying no. Like, I'm not going to that school function on top of the other school function, on top of tennis breakup, on top of that. I don't want to go to that today. Sometimes it's self-care saying no. Sometimes it's sleep. Like going, yeah, I set an alarm to go to bed to make sure I'm not, like, scrolling social media to go that. You need, like, I am a much better mom, psychologist, everything if I've had adequate sleep. So kind of like try and look at clients and go, how, and obviously sleep is different when you have kids. And sometimes I go, you need more time in bed if you're going to have, you know, 7 or 8 hours sleep. So kind of focusing, I guess, on those small, medium, large, and bringing a real awareness. And each mum's different as to what kind of lights are up. But if we don't firstly become aware of our needs, we can't then prioritize them and get them met. So a lot of the burnt out mums, a lot of quote unquote angry mums are mums who are depleted and they need more care.
Yeah.
So that's like the key thing, I would say.
It is. And that's sort of the area that I work with women is that self-care, finding your recipe. And that recipe is going to look entirely different. And they don't have to be great big hour chunks. They can come in those little small areas, but in the different wellness areas, like you were saying. Have you got yourself a nutritious start to the day? Have you been able to find that little part where you're just sitting with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the morning and just, if it's 1 minute of breathing, really mindful steps. It doesn't have to be huge, but I think it's the reminder that the simple things can have huge impacts.
You are spot on. It is that intentionality and those small things. They just have a really big impact on our well-being, and also an impact on our self-esteem as well. Like that we're caring for ourselves, like we're important.
Yes.
And I also think it's really good modeling for our kids. So they see us, sometimes saying no, and that's okay. And they see us, prioritizing our health, our well-being, because we want that for them, right? Yes. So we need to model that. Yeah. And I think having people around you and people like you who can help people make that a more intentional practice. And that's what it is, because with a lot of people, we talk about this and then they go, oh yeah, I will. And then I guess that's the benefit of therapy, because we're like, we need to check back in, because it's often the first thing that will slip. So we need to remind them, you need that oxygen mask. If you want to turn up and parent in a way where you can be present and you can enjoy your life, we need to look after you.
That's it. I think a lot of the time too, we're overscheduled, aren't we? We're overscheduled. Probably, some parents might be, in inverted commas, overscheduling their children with filling up every waking moment with, an activity here, an activity there, and so they're running everywhere with children at various ages, stages, and their whole weekend is then taken up for going from one sporting event or a cultural event to the other, and then they've got their work. Perhaps if they're in a workforce, the busyness in inverted commas again of work and the commitments there, it's having those boundaries to sometimes, as you were saying before, to say no, because it's a badge of honor. Hey, how are you? I'm busy. I'm really busy, as though that's a great thing. Or you have to say that. It's okay to say, I just need to stop. I'm going to stop today. Yeah, that's fine. If it's 5 minutes, wonderful. If it's half an hour, you beauty. But it's not seen as something that's as important as I'm busy.
And I think there's a real cultural shift happening there. So if someone says now to me, like, I'm busy, I often think, gosh, why?
Yes.
Yeah.
Get it. Take a check of yourself.
I want to live like that. Yeah, I've lived busy before. It's not.
No, it's not good. Yeah. Well, that was it. That was my life for so long, to the point of burnout. You go, there's no one gives you a medal at the end for doing everything like that. You're the one who suffers. And that's then what happens then? What happens to your family when you are burnt out? It means everyone else then has lost the person that they love the most, because you're in this horrible funk and all of these other things happening to you. And then we haven't even touched on, for a lot of women who are going through, hormonal changes and the hormonal differences when they've got their children going through the teenage years with the highs and lows of their hormones, dealing with their own hormonal shifts and the roller coaster that happens there as well. So, we've got to give ourselves a bit of slack.
Absolutely. I think what you said, spot on. You don't get a medal. And, we often, we don't sometimes I think we should get a medal and a value around sort of prizing that enjoyment. And, it's okay to enjoy motherhood or enjoy, whatever it is you're doing, and saying no to things to give you more space to enjoy the things you do like, and to be able to turn up in a way that you want to. I think as well, we know that a mum's mental health has a really big impact on her family unit. So we want to really prioritize positive, good mental health for everybody in the family. And I think sometimes as mums, they're so, as I said, outward focused on everybody else. And they sometimes, it's not an intentional thing. They're brought up in that way that, put yourself last, put everyone else above you. That's what a good mum does. And that sort of martyr kind of way of mothering, we kind of want to basically throw that in the bin and go, how do we make this a happy, healthy experience for you, which will be a happy, healthy experience for your kids? And how do we change things up to make this work?
Yeah. Is that another issue that you come up with as well, Jane? That comparison, rather than comparing mothering or your mothering style or what appears to be, what a good mother does, can we just compare? Like, do you try to teach the women or support women going through less comparison of others and more comparison of where you want to be to where you are now, and working those small incremental steps to get there? Is that the sort of thing that you do?
Absolutely. So we kind of touched on before, secure attachment is at the heart of parenting and building that relationship, with your kids. But how you do that looks so different in every household. And I'm always encouraging people to kind of mix it up and kind of do things a little bit differently. It's something I've tried a bit myself. Like I do this myself. So, I kind of came from a family where sort of children were very well behaved. And so sort of, being quite kind of loud or wild or, wasn't the done thing, so to speak. And I have a 3-year-old kind of pocket rocket, and she wants to climb everything and be amongst everything. And my instant reaction is to go, no, like come stand over here. And I have to just like bring that in. And inside I'll probably sometimes be like dying a little bit as she's like, so obviously I'm keeping her safe and making sure. There's sometimes where they'll, she might go a little bit far and I have to step in and set a limit and say, no, we're not going to do it that way. But I want to give her a little bit more kind of leeway to express herself. And sometimes it's really hard to watch a tiny human do that while you're standing there. But yeah, I think how we apply that is really different in every family. And, when we compare, so someone might see that and sort of think, oh my gosh, like her child's sort of running wild and climbing this, railing thing, or, even though she's safe in there, it might be an intentional choice on my part. So I just kind of go, other people's opinions of me are not my business. That is their business. And I think once you kind of develop that confidence in your own parenting, where you go, I know what I'm doing and how I want to parent, and you give yourself permission to make mistakes. Like, it's okay if we make a mistake. It's like, and I make mistakes. Sometimes I raise my voice and use unkind tone, and my 3-year-old will be the first to say, you've used unkind tone. And I'm like, oh, sorry, hang on. Mum was having a hard time managing my big feelings. I'm going to work on that. And kind of, giving them the language, like, that's very different to, I certainly wouldn't have told my caregivers they were using unkind tone.
I bet when she's 13, she might use different words.
Absolutely. I know I have no doubt. But I think, yeah, I think comparison is really hard, because a lot of the time, right, people don't even know what they're comparing.
Yeah.
Like, we're not even, like, you don't know what some other mother is going through or how she wants to parent. And, there's many different ways to achieve an outcome. So I do think that, that's sort of a bit separate to like the Instagram comparison, where we all kind of see people doing it and it makes everything look easy. And it's really easy to put a really polished kind of piece on Instagram. And yeah, I think that kind of comparison as well is obviously quite problematic, where, we feel quite down on ourselves that our average day doesn't look like the highlight reel someone's put together.
Yeah. If somebody is wanting, like a parent, a mum is wanting that little bit of help to, alleviate the pressure, because there's a lot of outside pressures happening that we can't control. There can be internal pressures within the family that we've got limited control over. And you were talking about that martyrdom, having to do it all. And that's sometimes a pressure we place on ourselves. Before we hit record, I was, we're talking about the sort of questions I was going to be asking you today. and I was saying a lot of women might want some help and expect their partner or other people around them to pick up that they're needing help, but they don't. And then they get really frustrated with the fact that I'm having to do it all and no one's helping me. It's at asking. So how could you suggest, how could you suggest, I'll try to word that differently. How could you suggest a mum to ask help from maybe her partner or a friend or a family member? What sort of words can you use? Because I think women are very proud that they want to be seen, in inverted commas, as doing everything, but you can't.
It's such an interesting question. And I think there's so much to this. So at the core of this, I think the person that can't ask for help probably believes that there's kind of shame in some way in asking for help, in asking for a hand to do something. Like they don't have it all together and they don't want to be seen as needing help. So I'd kind of, I guess, really want to pause there and kind of understand that more and go, well, what's wrong with asking for help? Like sometimes people genuinely want to help. Like, we build community. Sometimes people love getting asked to help. They love an opportunity to help. And then, they'd love you to help them in return. I think a lot of the time we get really scared about these conversations and, in partnerships, like where people, can't ask your partner for help. Sometimes they don't even know that you need help or that, everyone would benefit if you just said, hey, I've actually got a lot on my plate today. Do you reckon you could help with picking such and such up? Or can you make a start on dinner? And I think this really comes from women devaluing their own needs and not putting them up in line with everybody else's. So when they don't prioritize their own needs, they kind of self-sacrifice and they go, oh, I'll just do it. It'll be just easier for me to do it and I'll do it. Like I said before, you don't get a medal. What you get eventually is burnout, less zest for your mothering, your parenting, your role as a partner or spouse or whatever. And I think once we can kind of put a light on, hey, your mental health matters, your experience in life matters. How do we get your needs met? And sometimes it's as simple as looking at what's on my plate and how do I get a more kind of fair and equitable split, or how do I bring in more help?
And that's hard, isn't it, when you might be a solo parent too. I'm just thinking of all of the women out there who are solo parents and how bloody hard. I mean, I was lucky I had a great partner. Father of my kids, my husband was an absolute brilliant partner and great co-parent with me. I was really fortunate. There are so many women who don't have that, or who might be in a relationship where they're solo parenting with a partner who doesn't want to have anything to do with it, or is sabotaging, everything that they're trying when they do ask for help. So, I feel for those women. What have you got? I mean, I don't know. And again, everyone's going to be different, but what sort of thing could you say to those women who are in that situation?
I think sometimes it's sitting down and it comes to kind of identifying your needs. So what do I need? What would be most helpful? And then how can I get those needs met? How could that look? So if a solo mum, and it really depends if she's working or, what kind of support she has, what kind of friends she has. But sometimes, if she needs some time or someone to watch her kids, sometimes asking, like, are there family members? Are there other single mums or even partnered mums? Or it's like, hey, do you reckon you could watch, my kid for an hour or two, and I'd be happy to watch yours for an hour or two? Like, how can we leverage, our community? Is there, there's a lot of kind of drop-off programs and different things available where kids can go and do certain activities where you might be able to get some time off the clock. There's often a lot of creative ways to solve problems. Sometimes kids, they might want to watch a movie and it's like, can I put a movie on and steal an hour and a half in the office, depending on their age? If they're really little, how? And I think just by going, what do I need? And then how can I get that? And starting to kind of, sometimes we'll sit down and we'll just problem solve. Okay, how could that look? What options do you have? And a lot of the time, because they haven't identified what they need, they haven't got themselves in that problem-solving mode.
Yeah.
What they're in is this kind of tiz of like anxiety, overwhelm, and just constantly like, got to get the next, got to get the, like, got to get all these balls in the air. And we kind of just need that time and space to pause and kind of go. It's like, we've got to service the car, right? And we kind of need to, we go, oh no, I don't have time to get petrol. I don't have time to, it's like, well, sometimes with kids, you're filling up that tank and you don't know if it's like a short journey, or sometimes it's supposed to be a short journey, but you're actually on a really long journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of need to pause. We need to get little bits of petrol and bits of self-care. And sometimes we need a full service. And sometimes we need to pause and look at our life, because even in 6 or 12 months, kids needs can change greatly. And we're still doing things the way we were, and we don't even know why. And we go, hold up, actually, I could do X, Y, Z, and then I would have more time for whatever.
Yeah.
And I think, well, women need to, or mums, really need to value their time. It's the one thing we don't get more of. Everybody's time is worth the same. So, and I think sometimes we don't view time. We go, oh, I'll just do it. And every time we're saying yes to something, we're saying no to something else.
That's so right.
And unless we pause and really frame that up, and it's like, yeah, I'll do this. I'll just like, okay, what aren't you doing in that time? And they don't even think about it because they're just so self-sacrificing. It's this habit almost. But we can't just pull like, okay, I can see why well-being's down and mental health struggling. It's because we're burning out, we're overwhelmed. There's too much here and not enough self-care.
Yeah. And when you're in that high state of that high stress response, I mean, your brain's not thinking logically anyway. It's just next. It doesn't have that ability, and you don't have that ability when you are highly stressed all the time to sit back and think logically of these sorts of things that you just mentioned about how you could use your time more wisely. Could you ask for help elsewhere to give yourself, or find video, or stick something on for half an hour just to get yourself back into that lower state? I think it's those little small things. So I'm hoping that, Jane, through our discussion today, that's going to be, for some women, a time to pause and reflect and think about what they can do for themselves.
Absolutely, I hope so.
Well, that's my intention for this whole episode. Now, how if a woman's or a mum, and I'm using mum because this is sort of I'm talking redefining midlife for a woman, but how can a mother or a woman ask for or find, I shouldn't say rather than ask, find some great resources? And is there anything you can recommend? It's not going to be, again, a one size fits all, but are there, what can you recommend as a good first place to look and to go to if you're needing some resources, books, videos?
Absolutely. Look, there are an incredible number of really good books out right now around sort of parenting and exactly the kind of stuff that we're talking about. What I might do, if it's all right, is I will shoot you a link, and we might itemize a few to put in the show notes.
Oh, that'd be
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, if people want to have a look at some resources, head to the show notes of this particular episode, and you'll find all the ones that Jane has suggested are a good starting point. And Jane, for women who are at a point where just looking at a YouTube clip or reading a book is not going to be helpful, what's your next step that they should take?
Next step, I recommend GP. I think the GP, and you've got to have a good GP, right? So I think go to your GP and say, hey, things are kind of feeling hard at the moment. Firstly, we want to get all the health things checked for women, bloods, all that kind of stuff. And then also asking, hey, I think it would really help if I was to talk to someone like a psychologist. I'm a big advocate for psychology and positive mental health. I think absolutely everyone would benefit from seeing a psychologist. And there's certain times in our life, like stressful times, stressful periods, transitions that you're talking about, where, it's kind of a time to pause and reflect on how we're doing things. and kind of go, what are some other techniques or skills I can reflect on and learn to kind of make things better for me? And as we touched on, women's mental health, like, it impacts the whole household. So I would definitely recommend seeing your GP. Also, you can see a psychologist directly if you don't want to go through your GP. Would probably be my next port of call for people who are kind of struggling, or even people who just really want to do things differently and wanting. I don't think, I don't like the idea of we see a psychologist when we struggle, because there's a big spectrum of mental health, and we want to be bringing these things in before we're really mentally unwell. Yep. So, bringing the car thing back, with the light, on the dash, we kind of want to notice it before we're falling in a massive heap, and pausing and going, oh, I could use some help now. How, the body and the mind, like, it whispers before it roars, and we want to really tune into that, I think, and put our hands up and go, hey, I want to be a great parent, a great spouse. I want to, do things a bit differently, and I want to feel differently about my life. How, I might go see someone to help me with that.
Fantastic advice. Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's simple advice, but it's a matter of taking that advice and actually doing something with it. Because that whole idea of when you know better, you do better, to a point. You can know all of this and not action it. So taking those action steps that we've talked about today, those little snippets of self-care, finding that time for yourself, because how much time do we all think we've got? It's not. It's finite. So once that day is gone, you've got your new day to look forward to. So how are you going to use that time more wisely? Seeking support for some of the resources that you're going to give us, and then getting that extra support if and when you need it. But don't wait for it until it reaches crisis point. Get there earlier.
Absolutely. And I think just reminding mums, like, life's hard, but there's different levels of hard, right? And we all have seasons where things are a bit tricky, but we kind of don't want to live in this survival mode you're sort of talking about. Like, there's periods where we can be in survival mode, but we don't want that stretching out like long term, because then we're not enjoying, right? And, we deserve to enjoy our life. We deserve to kind of, look back on these years and go, yeah, that was a great time. Sure, there were hard times, and there's going to be hard times. As we said at the start, we're going to get good at sitting with uncomfortable feelings.
Yes.
But, definitely reach out. And I think as well with the transitions that you talk about, so, transitioning into different parenting stages. So when you have little kids to when you have bigger kids, to teens, to, when they're leaving the house, these are all really big shifts and identity shifts for mums, becoming a grandparent, and then how that fits in. And there's been a lot of change in the role of grandparent in society, and how grandparents show up. Another great time to see a psychologist. And retirement, the whole identity shift, and we have people kind of partially retiring, and there's a lot of life stages that we go through, where I think we would really benefit from this kind of deeper reflection, kind of putting the car in for a service and going, what's going on here? How do we want to tackle this part and the next part? And kind of that recalibrating, through reflection, to kind of make sure that we have good mental health through each stage of our lives.
Yes. I think people now, Jane, are recognising the importance of making sure that their mental health is something that they keep in check, which is great. Whereas years ago, it wasn't quite the case, whereas now it is. And before we wrap up, I would love to have you on again to talk about some of these bigger concepts, because we've covered a lot of country, and very just been able to do a quick brushstroke over all of them. So to maybe hone in on a couple of the topics that we've talked about today, maybe in the future, if you're open to that. But before
absolutely, sounds amazing.
I want to know, what are you enjoying about this phase of your life that you're in now?
I am enjoying saying no to things.
Excellent. Love it.
Yeah, I'm really at a phase, I guess, being that little bit older, I really struggled saying the word no. It was not something that came easily to me. So really enjoying getting really clear on what it is that I want to do and what brings joy for me.
Yes.
So I talk about a lot of these mums struggling to put their own needs. I've definitely been one of those mums, and it's hard. It's a practice. We all slip at times, and you kind of get really good at catching yourself when you're slipping and taking on too much. And it's a really busy time of year, and just got a different kind of approach to it this year, where it's all about how can we have the most enjoyment for everyone in our family, and what are we saying yes to, what are we saying no to, and just being really intentional around what we want to do this season. So
that's great. My final wrap-up question for today then, Jane, if you could look into the future, what do you hope 80-year-old Jane will say about current day Jane?
She will say, good on you for doing it differently. Like, good on you for kind of noticing that things weren't working well for you and making changes and doing things differently to how you maybe might have. So kind of being a little bit brave and choosing a different path. I hope that's what she would say.
I'm sure she will. Thanks for your time today, Jane. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.